The new female intern at the company suddenly started bleeding from her lower body while giving her work report. I immediately drove her to the hospital. After examining her, the doctor frowned and said, "You're pregnant and didn't even know? There are signs of a threatened miscarriage. If you want to keep the baby, you must be hospitalized for bed rest. It's your decision." The young woman was named Sophie, a fourth-year university student who looked inexperienced. She was pale with tears in her eyes, clutching my hand and asking, "Evelyn, what should I do?" I comforted her while instructing my assistant to arrange for her hospitalization. Probably due to the shock, Sophie's usually rosy, apple-like cheeks were still pale, and her big eyes had lost their usual sparkle. She lay listlessly on the bed, repeatedly asking me, "Evelyn, will I be okay?" Although I was a high-ranking executive at the company, I enjoyed mingling with these younger employees, and they didn't seem to fear me much. Especially Sophie, who reminded me of myself when I was young. When she first joined the company, someone said that if you covered the lower half of her face, she looked just like me back then. Because of this, I took extra care of her and gently touched her hair. "Don't worry, the doctor said you'll be fine." Sophie bit her lip. "Evelyn, have you ever been pregnant? What does it feel like?" As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized what she'd said and hurried to explain, "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I didn't mean it that way. I lowered my eyes. I was pregnant. I had an abortion." She froze. "Why?" "Because I didn't know. I drank too much and my stomach perforated. The baby didn't survive." My fingers twitched slightly. That was all so long ago. But whenever I think about it, there's still a dull, lingering pain in my body. Sophie looked distressed and gently touched her own stomach. "By the way, where's your boyfriend?" I reminded Sophie, "Tell your boyfriend to come over quickly. You can't be alone right now." She lowered her head and whispered, "My boyfriend is busy. He probably can't come here to take care of me." I frowned. This is a big deal. It's also his child. What could be more important than that? If your boyfriend can't even come for this, he's not reliable. She looked up in panic and explained, "It's not like that, Evelyn. He's very good to me. He's just inconvenient." I casually asked, "Is he a classmate? Or a colleague? You're not having an office romance, are you?" She bit her lip and refused to say more. "All right, I won't ask. Just make sure to take care of yourself." Sophie smiled. A young woman in her early 20s, she radiated youthful energy, clean and pure like a blank sheet of paper. She looked up at me directly, her eyes gleaming strangely. "Thank you so much, Evelyn. If it weren't for you today, I wouldn't have known what to do." I felt a bit uneasy for no apparent reason, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I nodded, told my assistant to stay and arrange a caregiver for her, then stood up and left. Just a few steps later, I bumped into Deng Yi, who was rushing over. I froze. "What are you doing here?" Deng Yi seemed taken aback to see me there, his expression flickering briefly before returning to normal. "Something happened at the company. As the boss, I had to come and check." He seemed to be trying hard to hide his urgency, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed his emotions. "How is she?" A sense of unease flashed through my mind, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. "She's fine. It was just a threatened miscarriage, but they got her to the hospital in time and gave her a shot to prevent it." Deng Yi visibly relaxed. "That's good." He paused for a moment. "You go back first. I'll check on the situation." I didn't think anything of it and turned to leave, but he grabbed my hand. I turned back. In the dimly lit corridor, Deng Yi's face was hidden in the shadows, and I couldn't see his expression. I only heard his voice, which sounded complicated. "Wife, I love you." Perhaps it was because I had been thinking about it during the day. That night, I dreamed again of the first child I had lost. At the time, I was only 19, younger than Sophie, and Deng Yi was just 20. We knew nothing about life. When my period was late, I didn't think much of it. That day, we had just paid off all of Deng Yi's gambling debts, and we couldn't afford the rent. So when I was working the night shift, I let a middle-aged bald customer force me to drink without resisting, just to make him happy and get a bigger tip. "Finish this bottle, and I'll give you 1,000. At that time, Deng Yi and I only needed 600 yuan for a month's rent, and getting this 1,000 yuan would solve our immediate problem. I drank cup after cup. The fake imported liquor bought by the boss felt like ice cubes wrapped around flames burning in my stomach. I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. The pain quickly intensified. Sweat beads formed on my forehead, and I trembled as I said, "Boss, I can't drink anymore, my stomach hurts." The bald man's expression hardened instantly. "What the hell are you faking? If you don't drink today, I won't give you a single penny. Call your manager over here." In agony and panic, my face grew cold. I pushed him away and rushed into the bathroom, vomiting violently. Blood mixed with alcohol gushed out amid the intense pain. My vision went black, and I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was in the hospital. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. A nurse making rounds frowned. "You're pregnant and didn't even know? Drinking so much alcohol? Your stomach is perforated." I froze, then instinctively touched my lower abdomen. To be honest, at that moment, I didn't feel anything tangible about carrying a life inside me. I just felt lost. Is the baby still there? I didn't know whether I should hope it was or not. My mind was a blank. Dang Yi and I couldn't even support ourselves. How could we possibly raise a child? The nurse sighed. "We couldn't save it, but it's okay. You're young, you'll have other children in the future. By the way, where are your family members? Have them come and pay the bill." Dang Yi arrived 2 hours later with the money he had borrowed. He knelt by my bedside, his eyes swollen and red, opening his mouth but only managing to ask, "Does it still hurt?" I whispered, "It hurts a little." "I'm sorry, Dang Yi. I was trying to earn some money to pay the rent, but now I've made you borrow money." He suddenly pressed his head firmly against my hand. Warm liquid trickled through my fingers. His voice trembled and grew hoarse. "You idiot. It's all my fault. I'm useless and made you suffer because of me." I panicked. "No, Dang Yi. I'm happy with you. I chose this." He gripped my hand tightly. Though I was the one who had just come off the operating table, it was him who was trembling in agony. "Fool," he choked out. "Ningen, wait for me. I'll make sure you have a good life." When I woke up, Dang Yi hadn't returned yet. The pain in my stomach from the dream hadn't subsided. I got up and drank a cup of hot water, but the pain grew more intense. My palms began to sweat as I searched for my phone to call Dang Yi. It took a while before he answered. Dang Yi's voice was low in the quiet night. "What's wrong?" My voice trembled. My stomach suddenly hurt so much. "Dang Yi, where are you? Can you come with me to the hospital?" Dang Yi was silent for a moment. "I'm with a client." "Can I ask my secretary to go with you?" The company was currently expanding, and Deng Yi was indeed often busy with clients. However, his secretary had already left for a business trip the next day. He quickly sent me a message. "Alexander is nearby. I'll have him pick you up." When I went downstairs, a black Maybach was already parked by the roadside. Alexander, dressed in a suit, was opening the car door and getting out. "Why did you come down by yourself? Are you okay?" I nodded reluctantly and got into the car. We drove quickly to the hospital, and the pain in my stomach eased slightly. After the blood test, Alexander went somewhere, and I sat alone in the corridor waiting for the results. The hospital lights were dim and cold, and on the metal chairs, there was only me and a plainclothed couple eating boxed meals. The man picked out the meat and handed it to the woman. "You're pregnant, eat more meat." The woman smiled shyly and pushed it back. "I just had a piece. You have to go back to work later. You eat." The two finished their meal affectionately, the man hugging the woman. "Lie down on my lap and rest for a while. I'll call you when the results are ready." "Okay." The woman curled up on the cold hospital chair, her head resting on the man's thigh, and soon fell asleep. The man moved slightly, took off his jacket, and covered the woman with it. I pulled my gaze away and opened my phone. My fingers paused when I scrolled past Sophie's WeChat moments. She had posted a photo of intertwined hands on a hospital bed, with the caption, "Baby, Dad, and Mom are here with you. You have to grow up healthy." I stared at the photo, feeling an inexplicable sense of familiarity with those hands. Before I could take a closer look, a breeze blew in from the window in the hallway, and I felt a chill. A jacket with a faint scent of TF ebony agarwood fell on me. Alexander, who had returned unnoticed, handed me a cup of hot milk. His black shirt accentuated his already tall and slender figure, and his handsome, chiseled features were clearly defined in the light. I paused for a moment. Thank you. Alexander shrugged. Where's Deng Yi? Why didn't he come with you? He's busy with business. Is that so? Alexander raised the corner of his mouth slightly but didn't say anything else. I wrapped myself in his coat, feeling a bit awkward for the first time in a while. Alexander was one of the few people in the company who knew about my relationship with Deng Yi. Their relationship was also quite complicated. Back when Deng Yi and I had paid off our gambling debts, Deng Yi used the remaining money to go to university. Alexander was his classmate, a few years younger, but very mature for his age. Upon graduation, the two shared the same vision and decided to start a company together. In the early days, they were like brothers, but Deng Yi came from a rough background, had too much ambition, and lacked a sense of security, always wanting to expand the business. The Xia family had been in business for 3 generations, and Alexander was born into a wealthy family, a true gentleman. He was calm and steady, and had warned Deng Yi several times that if he continued to expand recklessly, it would eventually destroy the company. Their differing philosophies strained their relationship, and over the years, the company quietly split into 2 factions led by Deng Yi and Alexander, engaging in silent competition. Deng Yi held 33% of the company's shares, while Alexander held 31%, leaving the two evenly matched. However, since I also own 8% of the company's shares, I can only keep Alexander in check by aligning with Deng Yi. When we were electing the chairman and CEO, I convinced several senior executives to vote for Deng Yi, and Alexander narrowly lost, becoming the vice president. Therefore, in this situation, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. Why are you dressed so formally so late at night? Do you have a date? I asked, trying to make small talk. Alexander replied casually, business. It's conveniently near your place. Oh, thanks for today. No problem. The atmosphere grew silent again, but the results came out quickly, and I sighed in relief, thinking it was just food poisoning or some minor issue. However, the doctor glanced at the report and said, "You're pregnant, already a month along. Do you want to keep the baby?" Deng Yi returned the next evening. He looked tired, but the corners of his mouth were turned up, and he seemed in a good mood. I called him over and handed him the report. "Deng Yi, I'm pregnant." After saying those words, I studied his expression carefully. To be honest, I had no idea how Deng Yi would react. In his early 20s, Deng Yi often said that once he had money, he would give me a grand wedding and that he wanted to marry me. But as we grew older, he gradually stopped mentioning marriage. Sometimes I hinted at it, but he only said he was busy with work and asked me to wait. I didn't know when it started, but I no longer felt certain of his love for me. Sure enough, Deng Yi's brows furrowed slightly before quickly turning into a smile. He hugged me and said, "Really? Honey, that's wonderful." His expression changed so quickly that I almost thought I was hallucinating. But I clearly saw that his first reaction wasn't joy. "Do you want this child?" I asked cautiously. "Of course," he smiled, casually rubbing my belly. "If it's like you, it'll be so cute." But my heart sank. There was no excitement or joy in his voice, as if we were discussing nothing more than a routine business matter. He quickly tugged at his tie and walked into the house. "I'm tired. I'm going to rest. By the way, since you're pregnant, you should stay home and rest for now." Since I still had a project to finish, I went to the office the next day. As soon as I entered the office, everyone was in a festive mood. My assistant excitedly told me, "Ryan gave out double bonuses this month because there's good news at home, and he wants everyone to share in the joy." I was taken aback, but a warm feeling spread through my heart. So Deng Yi wasn't indifferent after all, he just didn't know how to express it. I lightened my steps and entered the office with my bag. However, just as I sat down, the office door was knocked on. "Come in." I was looking down at the documents when I heard the voice and looked up in surprise. Sophie, wearing a white horn-shaped coat, slowly closed the door and stood at the office entrance. She clenched her hands tightly, clearly trying to stay calm. "Evelyn, I need to talk to you. My child is Ryan's." My mind went blank. After working with Deng Yi for so many years, I prided myself on having seen countless dramatic situations and never being at a loss for words. But in that moment, my mind went blank, and I couldn't even open my mouth. Sophie looked up at me. Evelyn, I know about your relationship with Ryan. I know I shouldn't be the one saying this, but he asked me to give him time to handle things between you two. But now I'm pregnant, and Ryan said he'll marry me. Evelyn, I know this isn't fair to you, but for the sake of the baby, I have no choice. Please step aside. The young girl stood there, her face filled with innocent certainty. In an instant, all my doubts were answered. I belatedly realized how foolish I had been. Those late nights when Deng Yi said he was out with clients. The unfamiliar scent of perfume on his body. How he rushed to the hospital in such a hurry, how he happily distributed bonuses to the entire company. It was all because of another woman. But we've been together for over a decade. In that moment, I almost couldn't believe it. I looked down at my hands in confusion, wondering if I was having a nightmare. When did you two start seeing each other? The words came out of my mouth, and I couldn't help but laugh. With Sophie's second-tier university degree, she shouldn't have been able to get into the company for training. But she did, and she started working in the assistant to the president's office. Who else could it have been? They must have started much earlier than I imagined. It was at school. Ryan met her when he went to our school for a donation event. Sophie bit her lip. Evelyn, I really didn't know you were together at first. And then? I laughed coldly. And then you found out, but you still continued being the third wheel? It's like chasing after a swan only to be pecked by its eye. This innocent, even a bit naive girl, how could she have mocked me in her heart when I took her to the hospital to save her and my lover's child? Sophie grew flustered, her face flushing red, but he told me he no longer loves you. He only stayed with you out of years of obligation. He loves me, and I love him. Now I have his child. Evelyn, you've never had a child. How can you bear to let our child be born without a father? And I'm too ashamed to say it, but you used to work as a hostess. Who knows how your child died? Maybe it wasn't even Deng Yi's. Ryan won't marry you. She didn't mention the child before, but once she did, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stood up abruptly and grabbed her collar. I worked as an escort. Ask your so-called good man where his first investment came from, and who paid off his gambling debts. What right do you have to accuse me? When I was with him, you were probably still playing in the mud. I was the one who supported him step by step to where he is now. What gives you the right to tell me to step aside? What are you doing? Sophie panicked and pushed me away forcefully. She pushed me right in the stomach. The familiar pain shot through me like needles, and my legs gave way. I stumbled backward, my lower back colliding with the corner of the desk. The intense pain made me see stars. The office door suddenly swung open, and Deng Yi rushed in, instinctively catching Sophie, whose eyes were red and teary. Are you okay? Deng Yi frowned at me. Ningen, what are you doing? Sophie's tears fell, looking even more wrong than I did, and she shouted. You were the one who sat on the stage. Did I say something wrong? The next moment, the room fell into a deathly silence. I looked at the office door that was still open, then at all the shocked colleagues and subordinates outside. I suddenly couldn't speak, and my stomach began to cramp and ache dully. The pain quickly intensified. Deng Yi's eyes widened. Following his gaze, I felt a warm flow beneath me, carrying a strong metallic odor. Before losing consciousness, I saw Deng Yi push Sophie aside and rush toward me, his eyes bulging. Ningen! The world plunged into darkness. For a moment, or perhaps forever, my consciousness felt chaotic. It felt like I was back in the hospital where I had my first miscarriage. Deng Yi was holding the 2,000 yuan he had borrowed, holding my hand and crying, saying he would love me forever. But the next moment, he suddenly looked up, and he was the 29-year-old Deng Yi again, his eyes cold and impatient. She's pregnant with my child. I don't love you anymore. Pain and cold alternately tormented me. I was drenched in cold sweat and suddenly opened my eyes. Deng Yi was standing by the bed, looking at me with a complicated expression. When he saw me look up, he turned his face away slightly to avoid my gaze. Just that one glance was enough for me to understand. I croaked. The baby, is it gone? Deng Yi whispered, the doctor said you already had signs of a miscarriage. It's not all Sophie's fault for pushing you. After saying that, he seemed to realize it was harsh and added. Ningen, you're still young. You'll have other children. I closed my eyes and whispered. Leave. Deng Yi stayed by my side without leaving, and I didn't speak to him either. That night, when I went out to use the restroom, I heard Alexander's voice through the door. What are you going to do about Sophie? Setting aside your personal relationship, she intentionally caused harm. The company can't keep someone like that. Deng Yi immediately said, Shuang didn't mean it. She's timid. Ning'an spoke too harshly, and she was scared. It was rare to hear Alexander laugh like that. His tone was tinged with mockery. She's 20 years old, an adult. She's not 12. Deng Yi, don't you find that ridiculous? Deng Yi sat in the hallway, took out a cigarette, and tossed it aside with a frustrated sigh. Alexander stood in front of him with his arms crossed. Deng Yi, what are you thinking? Ning'an has been with you for so many years, always giving her all for you. What's so special about Sophie? She's just a student who doesn't know anything. There are plenty like her at school. What do you see in her? Apparently unable to hold back any longer, Deng Yi rested his elbows on his knees and sighed. What can I do? She came to me when she was 19. She even got my name tattooed on her body. She's like a blank slate. I can't let her get hurt. Alexander coldly replied, Ning'an was already 19 when she was with you. Deng Yi remained silent for a long time. In the dead silence of the corridor, his voice rang out again, deafeningly loud. But I can't marry her. Marrying a woman who's been with other men, people will talk behind my back. He looked up, his expression rare in its confusion. Shuang reminds me of Ning'an when she was young. Back then, I was powerless, but now I want to protect Shuang, keep her pure and happy. I want to make it up to her. Alexander's brows furrowed with anger and absurdity. You own Ning'an, yet you want to compensate another woman? Deng Yi, are you out of your mind? What about Ning'an? Deng Yi lowered his eyes. I've already wronged Ning'an. I can't wrong Shuang too. I'll compensate Ning'an. I'll take care of her for the rest of her life, ensuring she never wants for anything. Except for marriage, I can give her anything. Alexander was likely enraged by Deng Yi's shameless logic and stormed out. I leaned against the wall. Strangely, at that moment, I felt neither rage nor sadness. It was as if I were watching someone else's story, devoid of any genuine emotion. I knew this was probably what they called dissociation. The human body forcibly detaches consciousness to save itself from immense, unbearable sorrow. I slowly made my way to the hospital bed. The small bed was only 1.2 meters wide, making it difficult to even turn over. Back when Deng Yi and I lived in the basement, the two of us also slept on such a small bed. I hadn't thought about those days for a long time, but now they came rushing back with the night wind. At that time, my parents had just divorced. My mother took my younger brother, and my father started a new family. No one wanted me. I had nowhere to go, no education, and no skills. Even waiting tables was too much for me, so I ended up working as a waitress in a nightclub, serving fruit platters and drinks. I still remember that dimly lit, tacky bar with its garish decor. The female boss, Ruby, with her bright red nails holding a cigarette, squinted at me. Why aren't you entertaining the customers? Someone like you could charge 200 a night for a drink, and at least 800 for a night out. Why are you working so hard like this? I lowered my head, twisting my skirt. I don't want to do that. Ruby didn't get angry, she just laughed and scolded me in her dialect for being so naive. No one comes here without sitting at the bar. One day, you'll beg me to let you sit with you. I've lived this long and never met anyone who hates money. That's how I ended up staying at that nightclub. Life was tough, but I managed to get by. Occasionally, there were difficult customers who were hard to deal with. One night, I was harassed by a customer again. A middle-aged man, drunk, demanded I go out with him and was refused. Feeling humiliated, he tried to slap me. His hand came down, but I curled up without feeling pain. Slowly lifting my head, I saw he'd been stopped by someone. A teenager of 18 or 19, dressed in black leather, held a metal pipe. He raised his eyebrows with a defiant expression. "Boss, you've had too much to drink." The man cursed and tried to fight back, but the teenager grabbed him like a chicken and dragged him away. He glanced at me, then dragged the man out. The other girls who were drinking with me excitedly grabbed my hand. "He's so handsome. Ruby just hired him to keep an eye on things. I heard he might have beaten someone up. If I could find a boyfriend like that, I'd even work as a prostitute to support him." Someone else laughed and scolded, if something good like that comes along, it won't be your turn. When he first arrived, I tried to invite him for a drink, but he just gave me a cold look and told me to leave. Maybe he doesn't like women. After that, I didn't have much interaction with Deng Yi, except for when I was harassed by customers, and he would occasionally step in to help me. One time, I saw him getting into a fight. Since he had helped me before, I took the first aid kit to tend to his wounds. He lowered his eyes, looking impatient. It's just a small injury. No need to make such a big deal out of it. I gently applied iodine to his split forehead. Even small injuries hurt. He stared at me for a moment, then suddenly turned his head away. Under the streetlight, I saw a faint red flush on his ears. After that, every day on my way home, I would run into Deng Yi at the alley entrance. He didn't say a word, just quietly followed me until I reached my front door before leaving. I went out of my way to thank him for sending me home, but he only replied indifferently. You're overthinking it. It was just on my way. Later, I found out that he rented a place in the far north, while I lived in the far south. It wasn't just a detour, it was completely out of the way. He would walk me home every day before heading back on his own. Teenage feelings are intense and irrational. I can't pinpoint exactly which day it was, but as I watched Deng Yi with his hands in his pockets, I suddenly asked him, "Hey, do you like me?" He froze, then his face flushed red, and he snapped. "What did you say?" Just as I thought I was overthinking it, he grabbed my wrist tightly, his expression fierce, not like a confession but more like a challenge. "Yes, I like you." "What's wrong with that?" I bit my lip, "Nothing. I like you too." Deng Yi froze. I still remember that kiss to this day. Under the moonlight, a teenager's kiss tasted like mint Marlboros. After we started dating, we had a good time together. Although neither of us had much money, he would save up to buy me gifts I liked. Just because I glanced at a dress in a shop window, the next month that dress would appear in front of me. I still remember the price of that dress, 3,000 yuan. That was 200 yuan more than Deng Ye's monthly salary, and he had borrowed that 200 yuan from someone else. I tearfully asked him to return it, but he smiled and cut off the price tag, tossing it at me. "Return it? It's just a dress. Let me see you wear it." Life was mundane yet happy. Just as I was daydreaming about saving enough money to leave this place with him, debt collectors showed up at our door. Our front door was splashed with red paint, and the landlord screamed at us to get out. That's when I found out that Deng Yi was deep in gambling debt, over 300,000 yuan, with interest piling up. He wasn't the contented person I thought he was, he'd always wanted to make big money. That night, we had nowhere to go with our belongings thrown out, so we sat on a park bench. Deng Yi had me lie on his lap, smoking in silence for a long time before suddenly saying in a hoarse voice, "I just can't accept it. Why are there so many rich people in the world, yet I can't even afford to buy you a dress without borrowing money? Ningen, I've had enough of this poor life. I really want to turn things around." He took a deep drag on the cigarette, his voice trembling. "Ningen, let's break up. I don't want to drag you down." I silently stood up and leaned against him, taking the cigarette from his mouth and taking a drag. It wasn't as smooth as I imagined. The smoke felt like a knife slicing through my throat, causing a sharp, uncomfortable sensation. I coughed all the way through the cigarette, extinguished the butt, and whispered, "I won't break up with you. It's just 30,000 yuan. I'll pay it back with you." 30,000 yuan was just the price of a bottle of red wine in Deng Ye's wine cellar later on. But for us back then, it was an astronomical sum. I found Ruby and told her I was willing to work as a hostess but wouldn't go out with clients. Ruby knew about my relationship with Deng Yi. She smoked in silence for a while before finally cursing at me. Another fool. I started working as a hostess, drinking until I vomited blood, clinging to the toilet bowl, just to earn a little extra commission. When Deng Yi found out, he had a huge fight with me, smashing everything in the house, and finally sat there in the mess, covering his face with his hands, saying nothing. I cried and hugged him. "I promise I'll only work as a hostess. I won't do anything else. Deng Yi, believe me. I just want to help you." He slowly reached out and hugged me, his voice hoarse and choked with tears. "Ningen, it's my fault." After that, Deng Yi also started looking for other ways to make money, no longer working as a thug, but instead following a so-called big brother to do business. All our money went toward paying off debts, and we lived in a basement for 600 yuan a month. Unknown insects with many legs and rats scurried around at night, and it was only slightly better in winter. But neither Deng Yi nor I liked winter because we couldn't afford an air conditioner. We could only buy an electric blanket to hug each other for warmth, with 2 coats piled on top of the thin blanket. At night, we shared a bowl of instant noodles. I wasn't full and could hear my stomach growling. Deng Yi held me tightly. Wife, one day I'll make you live a good life. I promise you, we won't live like rats in a gutter anymore. I curled up in his arms and smiled. Okay. I stood by the window, pulling my hospital gown tighter around me. The city was lit up, bustling with traffic even at night. Deng Yi was a smart and capable man. He invested the money I earned followed his older brother to make his first fortune, and we quickly paid off our gambling debts. I no longer had to work and we moved out of the basement. He built up a wide network of connections and broadened his horizons. He started his own business. I helped him run the company. Despite never finishing high school, I taught myself accounting and English and accompanied him to entertain clients. Later, he became increasingly successful, and the company grew larger. The balance in his bank account had more and more zeros. We had mansions all over the world. We no longer had to endure hardships. But the damp and cold from the basement still lingered around me, never disappearing. I clenched the railing tightly, and my delayed awareness began to return. Reason was completely consumed by rage. I felt a flame rising from the depths of my heart, as if it were trying to burn me alive. All the love I had felt twisted and distorted in the flames, eventually fermenting into hatred. I had followed Deng Yi for a full 12 years. I had poured all my youth into him, and he had promised me he would never betray me. How could he? How dare he? A cold wind howled, but I stood at the window feeling no chill. I felt as though I was being consumed by hatred. I lowered my head, coldly gazing down at the bustling, neon-lit city. I could lift him up, and I could bring him back down. Deng Yi had done this to me. He must pay the price. The first thing I did after leaving the hospital was to find Alexander. Alexander was dressed in a white shirt buttoned all the way up to the top, buttoned tightly, pressing against his Adam's apple. Unlike Deng Yi, who came from the streets and disliked being constrained, Alexander was strictly raised and always meticulous. Both of us were intelligent, so I got straight to the point. I can help you deal with Deng Yi. Alexander didn't respond, instead furrowing his brows and saying, Are you feeling better? A miscarriage isn't something to take lightly. You should rest for a few more days. I was taken aback. He stood up, poured a cup of hot water, and placed it in front of me. A new cup. No one's used it. I held the cup, feeling the warmth spread through my palm. Alexander didn't ask why I wanted to deal with Deng Yi. After sitting down, he crossed his arms on the table and said seriously, How do you plan to help me deal with Deng Yi? I lowered my eyes. I have all the information on Deng Yi, including the detailed bid documents for his next 2 projects. I'll find a way to sabotage all his projects, which may cause some impact on the company. However, the board election is at the end of the year, and with my votes, I can secure 3 votes. At that time, I'll nominate you as the new chairman and CEO. Alexander didn't look pleased, he just looked at me. What do you want in return? I looked at the cup in my hand. I want him completely out of the picture. I want you to help me figure out how to get the shares he holds. Once you become chairman, you'll nominate me as vice president and completely remove Deng Yi from the company. I looked up at him directly. I want him to be disgraced and left with nothing. Alexander didn't question or mock me, nor did he condemn my ruthlessness. He simply reached out his hand. Deal. I looked at his long, clean hand and gripped it without hesitation. I reconciled with Deng Yi. I was the one who approached him. After returning home, I embraced him from behind. I don't care about you and her. Deng Yi, we've been together for over a decade. If we part ways, I don't know if I'll have the courage to love someone else. Whether you marry her or have children with her, I'll be here waiting for you. Just remember to come back and visit me. Deng Yi paused, slowly turned around, his eyes filled with guilt and complexity, before finally hugging me back. Ningen, you always do this. I really feel so guilty toward you. But Shuang is still young. She didn't mean it. Don't hold it against her. I remained expressionless, my voice gentle. All right. We've been together for over a decade. Parting would be painful for both of us. Let's just stay like this. I won't tell her. Will you agree? Deng Yi buried his chin in the crook of my neck. All right, Ningen, if you're like this. I'll transfer the deed to my standalone villa in the city center to you. It'll be more convenient for you to commute to work. I smiled. I'm not with you for the money. I gently stroked his muscular back. Over the years, he had transformed from a frail teenager into a mature man. He despised me for accompanying him to drink. But Deng Yi, if it weren't for the money I earned by risking my life as a hostess, you'd still be a debt-ridden thug, probably beaten to death in some unknown alley. I gave you my heart, and you trampled on my blood and flesh to succeed, only to turn around and despise my heart for being too bloody. I slowly tightened my fingers. Then go back to where you belong. Everything I've given you, I want back. I returned to the company. Rumors started spreading about me, some of them very ugly. Some said I started out as a hostess and used the money to clean up my image. Others said I climbed my way up by seducing Deng Yi. Deng Yi never bothered to clear my name, but I didn't care. I kept working for him. He had long grown accustomed to my unwavering loyalty. I easily obtained the bid's base price from his office and passed it on to Alexander. Alexander acted swiftly. Half a month later, the rival company secured the bid with an offer just slightly higher than ours. Deng Ye's project, which had been meticulously planned over a year and required massive investments, went down the drain. He flew into a rage in his office, smashing everything in sight. How could they be just a hair higher than us? There must be a mole leaking our bid price. Find out who it is. The secretary cautiously looked up. Ryan, the final bid price is only detailed in your records. The other managers only found out at the last minute. Ryan suddenly turned around. Who else came to my office? The secretary whispered, only manager Evelyn, and Sophie. Deng Ye's expression darkened. After a long while, he said impatiently, bring Sophie here. My office was right next to Deng Ye's, and soon I heard the arguing coming from the next room. Deng Ye's voice was filled with anger. Who gave you permission to enter my office without my consent? Sophie said tearfully, we're all together. Can't I come to your office once? When you said you liked me, you weren't like this. Business is business, and personal is personal. You're just a secretary's assistant. Who gave you the right to come and go as you please in the chairman's office? Sophie said in disbelief, you suspect I leaked your bottom line? But Ningen was there too. Why are you only suspecting me? Deng Yi raised his voice, I've been with Ningen for over a decade. No one would betray me. Sophie began to cry, then does that mean I would betray you? Deng Yi, don't forget, I'm carrying your child. A few minutes later, Deng Ye's exhausted voice came through intermittently. All right, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. I was too impatient. Sophie was still crying. Stop crying. I'll buy you that Hermes White House you liked before. Consider it my apology. Sophie finally stopped crying and smiled. I sat in the leather seat, my lips curling into a sarcastic smile. Deng Yi is just like that. He says he loves you and cares about you. But in reality, he only loves himself. The moment someone threatens his interests, he'll turn on you in an instant. Unfortunately, I realized it too late. I looked at my fingers. Deng Yi and Sophie have only known each other for a couple of years. How many times can this fragile trust withstand suspicion? How long can his love for her last in the face of such a chaotic reality? I was eagerly awaiting that day. I began frequently taking sick leave under the pretext of being unwell. Many of the long-standing clients I had been maintaining started to voice their dissatisfaction, even delaying their orders. Deng Yi had no choice but to personally visit these major clients to maintain their relationships. All the projects I had been handling were put on hold, and Alexander used the excuse of being too busy to take them on, leaving Deng Yi with no choice but to take them on himself. For a time, Deng Yi was overwhelmed with work. He approached me several times, hoping I would return to work soon, but I kept brushing him off, saying I hadn't fully recovered from the miscarriage. Additionally, I kept leaking information to Alexander. Many of Deng Ye's core projects began to falter, and the company's cash flow nearly collapsed. He was so busy he couldn't even rest, and his meetings with Sophie, which had been daily at first, gradually became every 3 days, then once a week, and eventually, we barely saw each other once a month. Sophie couldn't take it anymore and went to Deng Ye's office to confront him. At first, Deng Ye tried to calm her down. "I've been very busy lately. Just give me some time, and I'll spend quality time with you." "Some time? You've been saying that every time. When will you finally be done?" After a while, Deng Ye also grew impatient. "I'm already exhausted. Can't you just leave me alone for a moment? Not everyone is like you, obsessed with love and romance. I have thousands of people under me who need to eat. Ning'an isn't like you. She used to." He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. But it was too late. Sophie snapped, Ning'an? You can't forget her, so why are you still with me?" "Yeah, she's a former escort, of course she has her ways. Who knows how she lured those clients? Maybe she slept her way to the top." "Enough!" Deng Yi shouted. "She's not like you say she is. I can help you too. I'm not any worse than her." Deng Yi sneered, "What can you do to help me? Do you know how to maintain client relationships? Do you know the procedures involved in taking a project from inception to completion? Besides eating, drinking, and spending my money, what else can you do?" Sophie was speechless for a moment, then began to cry. "I just want to help you, Deng Yi. Why are you being so mean to me? Baby, and I haven't seen you in so long." Deng Yi sighed deeply and softened his tone. "All right, I shouldn't have been so harsh with you. If you're bored, go buy something you like. Once I finish this busy period, I'll definitely spend time with you. You wanted to go to Hawaii, right? I'll take a vacation and go with you then." Deng Yi and Sophie never made it to Hawaii. Due to financial issues at the company, Deng Yi had to start seeking new investments. The manager of the investment company was an old acquaintance of ours who had previously invested in our projects. After several rounds of negotiations, the other party also expressed interest. Coincidentally, the company was hosting a business banquet, and Deng Yi asked me to accompany him. However, just as we arrived at the banquet hall and were discussing the prospects of the investment project with Mr. Zhang from the investment company, my words were interrupted. Sophie, wearing a backless, form-fitting evening gown with a V-neckline, walked over with her hair in big curls, her makeup flawless, and wrapped her arm around Deng Ye's arm. She looked at me with hostility, pulled Deng Ye's arm away, and gave me a seductive smile. "Evelyn, Deng Yi doesn't need your help." Mr. Zhang knew about my relationship with Deng Yi, and upon seeing this, he paused in surprise. "Who is this?" Before Deng Yi could speak, Sophie eagerly began introducing herself. "Hello, sir. I'm Sophie, Ryan's fiancée." This awkward title made Deng Ye's brows furrow slightly. Mr. Zhang's gaze swept over me and Deng Yi, and I smoothed my hair, my smile growing a bit melancholy. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Deng Yi and I have already parted ways. However, Mr. Zhang, please rest assured that our personal relationship will not affect our professional collaboration." Mr. Zhang's smile faded slightly. I still recognize Manager Evelyn's professional capabilities. Without looking at Sophie, he turned to Deng Yi and said indifferently, "I have some acquaintances over there. Go say hello. Ryan, feel free to stay." He didn't bother to listen to the project prospects and turned to leave. I couldn't help but sneer. Everyone knew that Mr. Zhang had started from scratch. Despite his wife's privileged background, she had never looked down on him and had always supported his career. Mr. Zhang was also a good man. After achieving success, he didn't abandon his wife who had stood by him through thick and thin. The couple's bond grew even stronger, and he had always taken pride in his happy family. He also held Deng Yi, who had a similar background, in high regard. In such a setting, bringing his mistress out so openly was something he couldn't stand. With Deng Yi now accompanied by a woman, I was left alone. A hand suddenly reached out toward me. Alexander, dressed in a black suit with his tie neatly tied, politely gestured toward me. "Are you here alone as well?" He always dressed impeccably at work, but at that moment, perhaps because of the dazzling crystal chandeliers in the banquet hall, he was so handsome it took me a moment to recover. Unlike Deng Ye's warm, tanned skin, Alexander's skin was pale and cold, with only his eyelids and joints tinged with a faint pink. He was always polite and proper, his almond-shaped eyes appearing completely non-threatening. However, on that day in the hospital corridor, I clearly saw that when he didn't bother to hide his true self, his eyes turned into cold, mocking phoenix eyes, smiling slightly with the corners of his eyes turned up. At that moment, he returned to his polite demeanor. I smiled and discreetly hooked my arm around his. Deng Ye's expression darkened, but the matter was far from over. Many of the company executives who came to greet him didn't seem to notice, and some of them were accompanied by their lovers, who mostly served as decorative figures, smiling silently. However, Sophie, whether out of a desire to show her support for Deng Ye's career or not, kept interrupting him and saying things that were off the mark. It was clear she had done her homework beforehand, but likely due to nervousness, many of the data points were wildly inaccurate. Deng Ye's expression grew darker and darker until he finally couldn't hold back and whispered. "Shut up." Sophie wasn't backing down. "What's wrong? Are you still thinking about Ningen?" Arguing in such a public setting was extremely embarrassing. Deng Ye's face turned ashen, and he remained silent. The other company's CEO glanced at Sophie and suddenly noticed the tattoo of Deng Ye's name on her body. "Oh, Ryan really knows how to play the game. You even have his signature stamped on your body, haha." The others also burst into laughter. This tattoo, which had once evoked pity in Deng Ye, had now become a joke he wanted to avoid at all costs. Deng Ye roughly pushed Sophie aside and walked away in large strides. Sophie probably knew she had made a mistake today. She ran after him and pleaded. "I'm sorry, honey. It was my fault today. I was just trying to help you." Deng Ye couldn't take it anymore and exploded. "Get out of here." Alexander and I were also in the middle of a critical phase of our project. The head of the partner company was very difficult to deal with. Even though we had already agreed on the terms of the cooperation, he kept pressuring me to drink. "I've heard that Evelyn, the manager at Yaohua, is a tough woman. If you drink all these glasses today, I'll invest in Yaohua." In the past, I've had my share of drinking to secure investments. These people are like demons, they're easier to deal with when you give them face. If you don't, they'll cause trouble. I instinctively reached for the glass. However, the glass was snatched away, and Alexander said calmly, "I'll drink them for her. I wonder if Mr. Wang will grant me that favor?" The portly man, seeing Alexander's expression, quickly backtracked. "Mr. Xia is joking. I was just joking." He wasn't afraid of Alexander's position as vice president, but of the power he represented as a member of the Xia family. With Alexander by my side, the entire banquet was filled with smiles. When the driver's car arrived, it had a flat tire. Alexander offered to give me a ride home. I should have thanked him, but I was so tired that I fell asleep without saying a word. The music in the car had been switched to soothing light music at some point. When I woke up again, I found the car had already stopped in front of my building. The cabin was dimly lit, and I was covered with a suit jacket that carried a faint woody scent. Alexander was looking out the window, lost in thought. "Why didn't you wake me up?" I felt a bit embarrassed. "Sorry, did I sleep for a long time?" "No, you were sleeping so soundly, I didn't want to wake you." Alexander turned around, the warm yellow streetlight casting a soft glow on his face. His expression was gentle, almost tender. I froze, instinctively reaching for the seatbelt. The atmosphere felt off, making me feel a bit flustered. However, the more I hurried, the more the seatbelt resisted. The buckle was stuck somewhere, and no matter how I pressed, it wouldn't budge. I started sweating in frustration. Alexander leaned closer. "Don't move." At such close proximity, I could even see every one of his long eyelashes, and the subtle woody scent became more pronounced. As our breaths mingled, I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. My heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably, and I blushed, afraid he might hear the pounding of my heart. Just as my mind was in chaos, Alexander's slender fingers moved slightly, and he sat back up. "It's okay." He unbuckled his seatbelt. I exhaled in relief and returned his suit jacket. Before leaving, I turned back and said, "Today, thank you for helping me avoid drinking." Alexander didn't smile, his expression was entirely serious. "You don't need to thank me. I hope we're allies fighting side by side. I know you're talented and capable. But sometimes, I hope you'll let me share the burden with you." I was speechless. I had never heard such words from Deng Ye. In Deng Ye's eyes, everything I did for him was expected. No matter what I did, I never received recognition from him. He seemed to dislike me showing too much strength. He had always preferred someone like Sophie, who could comfortably hide behind him. This was also one of the reasons we had grown apart over the years. But now someone was telling me they wanted to fight alongside me. A heavy echo resonated in my chest, and I lowered my eyes to hide my emotions. All right. After Mr. Zhang's investment went south, Deng Yi and Sophie's relationship deteriorated rapidly. Sophie called Deng Yi every day, and at first he would answer, but eventually he stopped picking up altogether. He came home every day but hadn't visited Sophie in ages. However, staying home every day meant it was harder for me to steal his files. After copying his secret files from his computer again, I happened to bump into Deng Yi as I was leaving the study. His eyes darkened. What were you doing in my study? I remained calm. I needed to send a file. My computer is at the office, so I borrowed yours. Is that so? What do you have in your hand? He didn't say anything else and didn't move aside. I knew Deng Yi was suspicious of me. It made sense. Every time I managed to get the most critical files, that was something Sophie couldn't do. It was only natural for him to suspect me. I naturally pulled out the USB drive. It's a USB drive. What, do you want to see it? Deng Yi stared at me for a moment before suddenly stepping aside. No, it's fine. My hands, hanging loosely at the sleeves of my pajamas, clenched tightly. I directly sent the file from Deng Yi's computer to Alexander's email, leaving no trace on the USB drive. Even if he checked, I wouldn't be afraid. As we passed each other, Deng Yi suddenly called out to me. Ning'an, you're the only person I can trust in this world. Will you betray me? I slowly turned around and hugged him gently. How could I? You're the person I love most in this world. You know I'd give you my heart. Deng Yi, how could I betray you? In this world, there's only the two of us left to rely on each other. Deng Yi's hands, which had been hanging down, paused for a moment before finally wrapping around me. By the way, didn't you say you were going to marry Sophie? How's the wedding preparation coming along? Deng Yi remained silent for a moment before speaking. Let's wait a little longer. He was just stalling. He hadn't given up on marrying Sophie. Long-suppressed hatred surged up, and I could barely control my trembling. These past days, I had exhausted myself, pouring every ounce of effort into bringing Deng Yi down. I knew that if I let up, I would collapse immediately. It was the hatred for him that kept me going. Everything I said was true. I had once been willing to give him everything because he was the only person I could rely on in this world, and I believed he felt the same way about me. Back in the basement, when we shared a bowl of clear noodle soup, the only egg was always given to me. He said he was allergic to eggs, telling such a ridiculous lie just so I could have an extra bite. Those days, I will never forget. If someone else had hurt me like this, I might not hate them so much. But this is Deng Yi. He's the man I loved so deeply, who loved me so deeply, and who I've depended on for 12 years. How could he do this to me? I dug my nails into his back muscles, feeling like a ball of fire, willing to burn myself to ashes just to reduce him to nothing. That night, Deng Yi finally asked me for intimacy after a long time. I had refused him many times before, but this time I couldn't refuse anymore. As we reached the peak, I held him tightly, coldly, even though he was drenched in sweat. At the closest distance between two people, I felt like we were growing farther and farther apart. After we finished, Deng Yi fell asleep quickly. He held me, just like before. I stared at the ceiling for a while before gently pushing him away. He didn't wake up and rolled over. On the same bed, we lay back to back, as if an uncrossable chasm lay between us. Deng Yi's financial chain had completely collapsed. Investments hadn't arrived, and the project was burning through money every day. Alexander only said his own project was also short on funds and couldn't spare any more. The board's dissatisfaction with Deng Yi grew by the day, and he was overwhelmed with problems. At that moment, I privately told Deng Yi that he could use the shares of his company as collateral to borrow some funds. Deng Yi firmly refused at first. Impossible. I persuaded him, once the funds are in place, the project starts production and begins generating profits, you can redeem your shares. It's only a matter of months, and the equity structure won't change, so no one will notice. Deng Yi was truly at a dead end and was swayed by my words. He asked me, is this a reliable option? I assured him, no problem. The funds will be in place within 3 days. It's an old connection. Deng Yi couldn't resist any longer and went with me to mortgage 20% of his shares, securing the funds for the project. He hugged me tightly. Ningen, thank you. Once I get through this, I'll definitely repay you. You wanted to go to Norway, right? I'll take annual leave and accompany you then. I had already heard this line before when he tried to brush off Sophie. Hearing it again now, I could only feel contempt. I smiled and said, all right. After he left, I immediately messaged Alexander. How's everything going? Alexander replied quickly. Everything's taken care of. Don't worry. I looked up. The midday sun was blinding, stinging my eyes. But I didn't close them. It was almost over. Alexander had turned two of the old men who had been following Deng Yi against him, and the loopholes in the project had been exploited. All we had to do was wait for him to lose everything. Sure enough, a few days later, Deng Yi's project collapsed. The project suffered massive losses, the company's stock price plummeted, and not only were there no profits, but more than half of the principal was lost. Deng Yi's equity collateral was also dragged into the mess. The board of directors was furious and immediately impeached Deng Yi, demanding his removal and the election of a new chairman. At the shareholders' meeting, I sat beside Deng Yi as usual. In just a few days, he had grown gaunt and haggard, with unshaven stubble on his chin and bloodshot eyes. Someone accused him. Deng Yi, do you have any idea how much the company has lost because of you? If this continues, the company will be ruined. That's right, the stock price has dropped by over 10 percentage points. How much is that in losses? Deng Yi, what the hell are you trying to do? Deng Yi surveyed everyone around him and suddenly burst into a cold laugh. Where were you all when I was out there fighting to build this company? Every year, I gave all the dividends to the dogs, and now one failed project and you want to remove me? His gaze grew fierce. The company charter stipulates that to remove the chairman, 2/3 of the shareholders must attend the shareholders' meeting and agree. If you have the guts, try to remove me. All the shareholders began to raise their hands. 2/3 was indeed a difficult number to achieve. I counted, and even with Alexander's efforts and the shareholders' dissatisfaction with Deng Yi, we were still one vote short. I hadn't raised my hand to vote yet. Deng Yi curled the corners of his mouth, as if he had anticipated this. He raised an eyebrow at Alexander. Alexander, you've worked hard to sabotage me these past few days. Unfortunately, you were one vote short. What a pity. Alexander replied indifferently. Is that so? The next moment, I raised my hand. I agree to remove Deng Yi from his position, and I nominate Alexander as the new chairman. The air seemed to freeze, and everyone's gaze fell on me, filled with shock and confusion. Almost everyone in the upper echelons knew about my relationship with Deng Yi, and no one had guessed that I would agree to his removal. Deng Yi beside me seemed to freeze in place. After a long moment, Deng Yi spoke in disbelief. Ningen? I turned my head and met his nearly blank expression. Alexander called out to me. Ningen, come sit next to me. I stood up and walked over to Alexander's side, sitting down in front of Deng Yi under everyone's gaze. Why? Deng Yi suddenly stood up, causing the massive desk to shake, but he seemed to feel no pain, his shock mixed with rage. Ningen, you betrayed me? I smiled faintly. Ryan, I've never been on your side. How can you talk about betrayal? Impossible. I'm still the company's largest shareholder. I interrupted him. The equity you pledged has expired. I forgot to tell you, that funding came from Alexander. As his eyes widened in disbelief, I spoke calmly. Your 20% equity now belongs to Alexander. He is now the company's largest shareholder. Deng Yi was finally removed from his position, and Alexander took control. He began sweeping reforms, halting or replacing all projects under Deng Yi's jurisdiction, and the company began to consolidate. Soon, Deng Yi was completely ousted from the power center. He tried to fight back, but Alexander and I didn't give him another chance. As promised, Alexander gave me the position of vice president. I no longer had to be Deng Yi's shadow, finally stepping onto the stage of power. No one dared to spread rumors about me, and no one dared to mention my past as a hostess. Everyone treated me with respect, addressing me as Mr. Ning. The feeling of revenge wasn't as satisfying as I had imagined. Breaking ties with Deng Yi wasn't as painful as I had anticipated. I was too busy with work and socializing. Time truly is the best medicine. I rarely had time to think about Deng Yi anymore. Deng Yi eventually stopped coming to the company altogether, as if he had completely given up. I moved out of our home, believing our entanglement had come to an end. 3 months later, under Alexander's reforms, the company began to get back on track, and the stock price started to rise steadily. At the year-end party, everyone was in high spirits because of the bonuses, and subordinates came one after another to toast me. I had drunk quite a bit and felt a bit tipsy, so I decided to go downstairs for some fresh air. As I walked past the corridor, a hand suddenly grabbed me tightly and pulled me into the cold storage room. My back slammed against the wall, and a strong hand gripped my neck. Deng Yi's dark eyes blazed with anger. Why did you betray me? How much did Alexander give you? Deng Yi showed no mercy. For a moment, I knew he really wanted to kill me. I had ruined all his hard work over the years. It was only natural that he wanted to kill me. I laughed sarcastically. Why? Don't you know why? A look of contempt flashed in his eyes as he growled. You were sleeping with him behind my back, weren't you? Damn it, you're just a whore. You're such a bitch. I started coughing and laughed hysterically. Ha ha ha, yes, I'm a whore. Your debts were paid off by selling yourself, and your startup money was also from me selling myself. I'm a whore, what are you? A whore's kept man? I had never spoken to Deng Yi like this before. He seemed not to recognize me, clenching his teeth in fury. How could you become like this? Ningen, you were the only person I could trust in this world. How could you betray me? I raised my knee and collided with his lower body. He instinctively stepped back. I bent down to catch my breath, then looked up at him coldly. Why should I ask you why I've become like this? Deng Yi, you betrayed me first. You promised you wouldn't let me down, but now you have a woman you want to marry and a child. Why do you think I'd be so stupid as to stay by your side as your secret mistress for the rest of my life? How do you know I won't marry you? He shouted. I heard everything. I shouted back. You told Alexander you wouldn't marry a woman who's been with other men, that people would talk behind your back. Deng Yi was speechless. Just then, the sound of a door closing came from nearby. Deng Yi and I exchanged glances and rushed toward the door. But it was too late. The cold storage door had already closed, and the air conditioner on the ceiling began to blow out white mist like cold air. The cold storage was starting to cool down. No matter how hard we pounded on the door, there was no sound from the outside. I took out my phone, but it had no signal either. We're doomed. The company's cold storage wouldn't be opened until tomorrow morning at the earliest, and the temperature inside would soon drop to -28 degrees Celsius. I was wearing a skirt, and Deng Yi was only in a suit. We'd freeze to death in here. No matter how hard we tried, it was useless. Deng Yi kicked the sturdy cold storage door with all his might and cursed. Damn it! I hugged my arms and slowly slid down the wall, sitting on the ground. I didn't even feel like cursing at Deng Yi anymore. I just felt ridiculous. Life was like a huge joke. I had just succeeded in my revenge and thought I could start a new life, but now I was about to freeze to death here with Deng Yi. Was this really the karma between the two of us? Moments later, a suit jacket was thrown onto my head. Deng Yi stood there with a dark expression, saying nothing. But soon he couldn't keep up the tough act. The freezing temperature of -28 degrees could subdue even the toughest words and ease any tension. The two of us had no choice but to wrap ourselves in the same jacket, hugging each other for warmth. Both of us remained silent, turning our heads away. In the cold, dim warehouse, Deng Yi suddenly spoke. Do you remember when we were like this before? Since I decided to take revenge on Deng Yi, I hadn't cried once. I thought I only felt hatred toward him. But when he said those words, my eyes suddenly stung, and tears fell uncontrollably. The sense of injustice felt like a flood breaking through a dam, and I suddenly realized why I hated Deng Yi so much. Because I loved him. The more I loved him, the more I hated him after he betrayed me. I lowered my head, and when I spoke again, my voice trembled uncontrollably. Yes, back then I was just a hostess, and you were just a thug. I've been with you all these years and never once looked down on your background. You owed 30,000, and I never once thought of leaving you. I didn't know you'd amount to anything, I just wanted to be with you, even if we had to live in poverty. I looked up and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. I gave you my whole heart. I saw you as my only support. You said you wouldn't let me down, you said you'd marry me, and I believed you. But now you've fallen for someone else. If you love her, just tell me clearly, and I won't cling to you. But why did you have to betray me? You said you felt guilty toward me, that she reminded you of me, so you'd rather hurt me to make it up to her. Don't you think that's ridiculous? I gave birth to 2 children for you. She has a child now, and you're so happy. But my children are gone, and you didn't shed a single tear for them. When I lost my children, you were worried I'd hold her accountable and even defended her. I hate you so much, Deng Yi. In that moment, I wished you were dead. Without me, Ningen, there would be no you, Deng Yi. Everyone in this world can look down on me, but you, Deng Yi, have no right to look down on me. I wiped away my tears, my voice regaining its calm. You ask me why I betrayed you, Deng Yi. It's all because you taught me. Deng Yi remained silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse and dry. I don't know, Ningen. I never thought about it. Why didn't you tell me? I laughed coldly. What should I have told you, Deng Yi? Would you have stayed loyal if I had? He remained silent for a long time. The cold air seemed to freeze. Do you still love me? He suddenly asked a question I hadn't expected. I closed my eyes. I did. But now, I don't love you anymore. If, he whispered, I let her go, Ningen, could we go back to the way we were? What do you think? I sneered, pulling my lips into a mocking smile. Deng Yi nodded. Some things don't need to be said so clearly between adults. He wasn't stupid, he understood the saying, a broken mirror can't be mended. The surroundings grew colder and colder. Deng Ye's embrace was no longer warm. I felt sleepy and my consciousness began to blur. Suddenly, Deng Yi spoke beside me. His voice was hoarse, as if all his strength had been drained. Ningen, I know why. I'm sorry, I realize it's too late. It was too late. But I didn't have the strength to speak anymore. Just as I was about to give up hope, a loud bang suddenly came from the door. The next second, the door was violently opened from the outside, and light flooded in. Backlit, I saw a tall figure striding toward me. The next second, I was picked up horizontally. The familiar scent of sandalwood enveloped me in warmth. I only managed to hear Alexander call my name. Ningen. The next moment, I fainted. I was seriously ill and didn't leave the hospital until 3 days later, still feeling weak. Alexander took me home, but this time he didn't stay in the car, he took me straight home. Contrary to what I expected, Alexander was surprisingly good at taking care of people. He cooked porridge for me, added dried scallops, abalone, and even made it taste good. Take your medicine. He handed me a cup of warm water, watched me finish the porridge, and then gave me the medicine. I took the medicine and leaned against the bed. He tucked the blanket around me. The atmosphere fell silent, and I didn't know what to say. I'm not stupid, and adults don't need to play games. I could tell Alexander had feelings for me. He had been taking care of me the entire time I was in the hospital. We had no connection, and he was so busy, yet he had put aside all his work to stay by my side every day. I couldn't lie and say I felt nothing for him. Someone as outstanding and kind as Alexander, who wouldn't be moved by him? But I dared not accept his feelings. I feared he might end up like Deng Yi, and I couldn't endure another heartbreak. I was torn, my mind in turmoil. Alexander must have noticed too. He lowered his gaze and said, I'll go first. His voice was faint, devoid of emotion, and the tenderness in his eyes had turned to melancholy. I looked out the window at the pouring rain and blurted out. It's raining heavily now. It's okay, Alexander stood up. It's getting dark. It wouldn't be convenient for me to stay. I can wait in the car until the rain stops. As he turned to leave, I instinctively stood up and grabbed his wrist. He turned back, his eyes questioning me. I lowered my head and clenched my teeth. Stay. Alexander paused for a moment, then turned back, now standing towering over me. What do you mean? In the dimly lit room, illuminated by the rain, his expression was calm, but his eyes were unusually bright, as if a fire was slowly burning within them. I turned my head. When did this start? Alexander understood what I meant and tilted his head. I don't know either. At first, I always saw you following him, and I hated you back then. I thought you were just as annoying as him. But then I couldn't help but keep looking at you. I started to envy Deng Yi, envy him for being so lucky to have someone who loves him so completely. Then I got angry. You were so focused on him, never giving anyone else a glance, yet he didn't even appreciate it. I thought, since he can't take care of you, maybe I should try. I stared at my toes, but I'm just a bar hostess. Even Deng Yi looked down on me. How could Alexander, who was born into a completely different world, accept me? That wasn't your choice. Won't you look down on me? In the pouring rain, Alexander's voice was steady, as if nothing could disturb him. I just wish I had met you sooner. You wouldn't have had to suffer so much. I thought my heart had been forged through 1,000 trials, that it was unbreakable. But his words spread like water, slowly soaking my heart with warm tears, seeping through the cracks with a bitter, indescribable sorrow. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Rest first, he said, turning to leave. I grabbed his hand again and whispered. Stay. Alexander turned back and looked at me intently. This is the second time you've asked me to stay, Ningen. I'm not the kind of upright gentleman you imagine me to be. Don't trust me too much. I didn't say anything, still holding on to his hand. The next moment, shadows suddenly engulfed me. Just before the kiss landed, I hurriedly dodged away. Alexander frowned. I explained, I still have a cold, it's contagious. I'm not afraid. He roughly pulled off his tie and tossed it aside. The black silk fell to the ground. The violent kiss, completely at odds with his gentle demeanor, forced me to step back until my back was pressed against the floor-to-ceiling window, with nowhere else to go. The heavy rain swirled on the glass like a Milky Way. I had always thought Alexander was a calm and rational person, but his kiss was more domineering than Deng Ye's. I almost lost my breath, letting him flip me over and press me against the window from behind. Wait, I panicked, pressing my fingers against the glass until they turned white. He wrapped his fingers around mine from behind, swallowing all my words. It's too late. I didn't wake up until nearly noon the next day. Alexander was still asleep, awakened by my movements. We stared at each other, his gaze clear, mine evasive. It wasn't that I was being overly sensitive, it was just that things had progressed too quickly between us. Just a few months ago, I was the girlfriend of his rival. Now I was sleeping with him. I racked my brain for a topic to ease the awkwardness, but Alexander stared straight at me. What are we now? I didn't speak. Actually, I also despised myself for being so sensitive. We'd already slept together, now I was acting so coy. But I was truly afraid. I didn't dare to go through it again. I didn't know if I could handle it if it happened again. Alexander looked at me for a moment, said nothing, and got up and left. He didn't even bother to put on any clothes, and for a moment I thought he was so angry he'd lost his mind. I quickly got up to chase after him. But he suddenly pushed the door open and came back in. He was holding a stack of documents in his hand. What's that? He handed me the documents, share transfer agreement. I voluntarily transfer 30% of my shares to you. From now on, you will hold 38% of the company's shares and become the largest shareholder. I'll work for you. Will you trust me now? I was speechless for a moment before I heard my own voice. Do you know how much these shares are worth? I think I should be well aware of that. Are you crazy? No, Alexander said calmly, I'm in good mental condition. I just feel that you are more important to me than these shares. He took out a pen and spoke succinctly. Sign. I stood there for a long time before taking the pen from his hand and signing my name carefully. Alexander finally smiled slightly. So, what are we now? I stepped forward, hugged him, and buried my face in his chest. Hello, boyfriend. His chest trembled, and his smiling voice echoed above my head. Hello, girlfriend. The next time I saw Sophie was at a mental hospital. Alexander took me to see her. I thought you might want to know how she's doing now. The first thing I did after taking control was to fire her. Sophie had come to the company causing a scene and was stopped by security, not even allowed to enter the elevator. I heard she had approached Deng Yi and even used the child to pressure him into marriage. But Deng Yi gave her an abortion fee and broke up with her without hesitation. Sophie refused to break up, and during their argument, she might have been too emotional and saw blood. After going to the hospital, the baby couldn't be saved. It was a fully formed male infant who had a faint breath when he was born, but he died shortly after. Sophie was traumatized, dropped out of school, and couldn't complete her studies. She came to the company with a knife intending to confront me, but she was stopped by security before she could enter the building. I sent her to a mental hospital and paid for 10 years of treatment, Alexander said casually. Don't worry, she won't bother you again. Sophie's hair was disheveled, her expression twisted. It was clear she was seriously ill. But she could still recognize me. She screamed and struggled. Ningen, you bitch, it's all your fault. You're the one who should die, your child should die, give me back my child. Ningen, you'll never have a good death, you'll never have a good death. What gives you the right, you old woman, what gives you the right? After all, she was just a student, her insults were limited to a few repetitive phrases. I didn't feel much hatred toward her, I just felt a sense of pity. A young girl who hadn't even entered society yet was deceived by an adult man's sweet words, and even though she knew she was the other woman, she still defended her so-called love. In the end, she ended up like this. Pitiful and hateful. I looked at her for a moment, then turned and left. The nurse quickly entered the ward. Patient in bed 312 is having another episode. Give her a sedative. The screams and cries behind me quickly faded away. I couldn't hear them anymore. After getting engaged to Alexander, I returned to my hometown. There were still many relatives there, but when my parents kicked me out that year, none of them had bothered to help me, as if I didn't exist. Now that I had money, they all came out of the woodwork, trying to reconnect with me. I ignored them. I just wanted to return one last time to see the small town where I was born. All these years, I've pulled myself up by my bootstraps. If I have anyone to thank, it's the 17-year-old version of myself who was alone and struggling but still fighting to survive. I walked aimlessly, and when I looked up again, I had already reached the urban village where Deng Yi and I had once rented a place. The building we lived in had long been demolished, along with the basement from back then, leaving nothing but clean, brand new buildings in its place. It was dismissal time, and raindrops began to fall from the sky. Teenagers in blue school uniforms, wearing their school jackets, ran past me quickly, their eyes filled with smiles. I closed my eyes, and the 19-year-old Deng Yi appeared before me, smiling as he handed me the skirt. 3,000 is nothing. I'll work hard to earn money and buy my wife a skirt worth 30,000, even 30,000. The flashback vanished in an instant. When it reappeared, the young Deng Yi was sitting far away, wearing a faded denim jacket, watching me. Though his face was that of a teenager, his voice was that of the mature Deng Yi. He spoke in a hoarse voice. Ningen, I know what you want. Through the heavy rain and the crowd, the water on his face, whether rain or tears, fell to the ground, stinging his eyes red. In that moment, the 19-year-old Deng Yi and the 29-year-old Deng Yi overlapped. He said, I'm sorry, Ningen. Don't forgive me. On the day I married Alexander, I received a letter. A thick stack. Upon opening it, I found that most of the thickness came from documents. It was a share transfer agreement, in which Deng Yi transferred the remaining 13% of his shares to me. I was stunned. This was the fruit of his years of hard work and struggle. Although he had been pushed out of the power core by me and Alexander, this was also his capital for a comeback. A man like Deng Yi lives to climb the ladder. For that, he can give up everything. Yet he gave everything to me. He truly has nothing left now. Besides the documents, there was a thin piece of paper. It was a letter. Ningen, it's been a long time. I heard you're getting married. Congratulations on your wedding. Alexander isn't as upright as he seems on the surface. He's actually quite cunning. But I admire him for one thing, he was able to marry you. I have to admit, he's stronger than me. I always thought he was smarter and more capable than me. But now I know he's always thought ahead of me. He knew what he wanted. And I realized it too late. The first 20 years of my life were spent in poverty. I had no money, I was in debt from gambling, and the woman I loved most had to work as a hostess to pay off my debts. I was in agony, but I couldn't do anything about it. So I hated that time. Perhaps in your eyes, it was a time when we relied on each other for warmth, but in my eyes, that time was a constant reminder of my own helplessness. That was the time in my life I least wanted to recall. Over the years of success, I never once thought about or dreamed of that time when I put money first, when I struggled desperately to climb up, when I wanted to shake off that disgraceful past. Later on, I even began to avoid seeing you. You've seen all my failures, you don't admire me. My success is just an illusion to you. Every time I see you, it's like I'm back in that dark, damp basement. I started going home less and less. Then I met Sophie. She reminds me of you when you were young, innocent and unaware of the world. Most importantly, she's never seen me at my lowest. She looks at me with admiration. In her, I found the feeling I wanted to find in you. I want a you who has never seen me in poverty. A you who hasn't suffered because of me. I started pursuing her, spending money on her, giving her everything she needed or didn't need, burning all my passion for her. I even wanted to marry her and have a family with her. I thought I loved her. But later I realized that I had never truly loved her. I was just trying to find in her what I couldn't find in myself. I was so foolish. In the end, I realized that it wasn't you I wanted to let go of. It was the helpless version of myself. All along, the only one I loved was you. I finally understood, but it was too late. I don't want you to forgive me, and I know you never will. I just want you to be happy. If I can't make you happy, then I hope someone else can. Be happy. Don't forget me. In a daze, I looked up and saw someone in a suit walking toward me. It was Deng Yi, who was 19 at the time. We had also taken a wedding photo together once. At that time, a wedding photo flyer had fallen in front of the rental house, offering free photo sessions. I didn't know about the hidden fee for selecting photos later, so I excitedly dragged Deng Yi to the studio. The wedding dresses at the studio were of poor quality, yellowed and fraying, and the suit was loose and ill-fitting, but it still looked good on Deng Yi. We held hands and smiled broadly at the camera. The boss never charged us for that photo. In exchange, he posted it in the store as an advertisement. 10 years flew by, and the young man who once blushed at me walked through the crowd, extending his hand toward me. I didn't take his hand, and his expression turned sad. I stood there watching him, his figure gradually fading into the light. The next moment, the person standing before me was Alexander. He reached out to me against the light, a smile on his lips. Let's go, the wedding is about to begin. The world returned to normal, with the gentle wedding march playing in the background. Relatives and friends watched us with blessings on the grass. The sunlight fell on me. The coldness of the basement had completely vanished. I slowly placed my hand in his, intertwining our fingers, and smiled.